This conference will now be recorded.
All right, Doug, the one thing that isn't happening is the stream going on YouTube. Okay. I think Doug might be frozen. There we go. Hey Doug, the only thing that's not happening is the stream isn't working on YouTube. Do you have any?
What's not working with it?
It doesn't look like it's gone live.
You can only do what you can do. So if you can't get it running live, well, I'll just have to run without it. We got the recording, so if somebody wants to listen to it, they can listen to it.
Okay.
Right. Ella? All right. The February 2023 meeting of the Board of Commissioners for the South Whidbey Parks and Recreation District is called to order at 6:05. Is there anyone for public comment? All right, hearing no one for public comment, has every commissioner had an opportunity to review the minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions, any comments?
And I think we lost your audio.
Yeah, I'm not hearing anything.
How about now?
Yes.
All right.
Now I'm hearing stuff.
All right, could you please repeat the motion and the second, please?
Sure.
And you just went out again. Now you're back.
Okay. I will make a motion to approve the annual meeting and regular meeting minutes from January 18th, 2023.
And I will second that motion.
It has been moved and seconded to accept annual meeting and regular meeting minutes from January 18th, 2023. All those in favor say aye.
Eric, I.
Krista, I.
Jake, I.
And I,
Jennifer, aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it and the motion carries. The minutes are approved. Matt, will you please lead us through the treasurer's report?
yes, I will. So this is the first month of 2023 reflected here through January. So it's cumulative, but it's only 1 month of data. So you can see here, we are, as of the end of January, slightly favorable to the January plan, and up is favorable, down is unfavorable. With the full scale of the year, it's hard to see that, but it's 13,000 roughly overall favorability. And if you go to the next slide, revenue represents a small portion of that, roughly 2,000. And then the next slide shows expenses represents the other roughly 12,000, rounding to 13, roughly 13,500 total favorability. If you look at the fund balances, you'll see reflects the, where you'll see the transfers reflected January to put us on plan for the reserve fund for the full year 2023. You can see it's just one data point up there at for M&O. So you'll see trends starting next month, obviously, but the most important point here is the reserve fund being set to the new forward-looking balance requirement for 2023. Any questions on the report so far? If not, we'll move to the vouchers.
Anyone have any questions? In payroll for Kathleen, I noticed that it was, has she taken on additional duties?
I use her at times to fill in for some of the pickleball, 14 different pickleball sessions.
Okay. All right, thank you. The Simplot invoice, is that something I? Okay. And then the Clinton Community Council. So Carrie, is that something that you will send directly to them, or do I need to pick it up so I can hand carry it to my next meeting?
Whichever. It's probably easiest for us just to mail it.
I just
It will be
seeking
clear to
clarification.
mail next Wednesday.
Okay.
And a question, why was the canine nose work canceled?
It was postponed. The instructor had to have back surgery. So we gave the option of people to postpone until we find new dates or get a refund.
Washington State Ferries annual maintenance fee.
Yeah, that has to do with having an account with them. So we have cards. It was a somewhat new thing last year, first year. So the privilege of having a charge card, multiple charge cards for the ferries.
Huh. Okay. Right. Anyone else?
Okay, if there are no further questions, I'll make a motion to approve the vouchers for a total of $105,083.10 from the M&O fund and $2,978 from the property fund.
I'll second that motion.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the vouchers for $105,083.10 from the M&O fund, $2,978 from the property fund. All those in favor say aye.
Eric, I.
Krista, I.
Jake, I.
Matt, aye.
Jennifer, aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the vouchers are approved.
Jennifer, I got two more items on the treasurer's report.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so first off, just as an information item, Carrie and I have coordinated to bridge the gap with Doug's departure for me to pick up signatory authority for the various things to keep the business of the park running. So payroll and vouchers and other things. Those systems now are set up with me, and access has been provided me. So we've got those set for the next several months, and we'll transition those back once we hire a new executive director. Second, I wanted to let you know that the report that we had talked about that several commissioners had given feedback to me and the staff on, we've drafted it and walked through an example of it, but with Doug's departure, the staff was not able to complete that for this month's meeting, but we will bring it to next month's meeting. And that's just a version of the report by categories that captures the available funds and available bandwidth looking forward through the full year's budget by category, to allow for more precise decision making and provide better input to decision making. So that's coming. I apologize, we were not able to pull that off with the events of the last couple of weeks, but we will bring that back in February. I mean, for the February report.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt?
Great.
Okay, moving ahead to the staff report. Who will be leading us through the staff report?
I can do that if you'd like me to.
Go for it.
Can you open it up for me?
Yep, right there.
Thank you. Okay, so we had our first officiated league games through South Whidbey Park since March of 2020. We had indoor pickleball, had 77 that was for youth basketball. We have indoor pickleball. We've had 77 monthly passes purchased. We've filled 3 pre-registered weekly sessions for a total of 60 attendees and had 291 single drop-in fees paid. Registration is now open for the triathlon. And then the summer activity guide, new proposals are due March 1st. Existing programs are due March 15th. And the guide will be published and distributed in early April. We already kind of got into the February classes postponed until March, April for medical purposes on K9 nose work. And then you got a couple of nice photos of the 3rd and 4th grade girls and an impromptu kind of pickup game in the around the community center with the boys while they're waiting for power. With the facilities and grounds, the weather is broken just enough to do some edging, weeding, dragging, and to prepare the baseball infields. Just completed the equestrian access trail at Trustline Trail, so that trail is now in. I walked it on Friday before I left. I thought it looked great. All sports fields have now had an application of fertilizer, and we are seeing the turf begin to wake up. That's good. And Tom will be setting up a meeting soon with Derek Hacker to look at the 3 lake sites. I've asked him to loop in Krista and Eric as the Lakes Committee on that. And then Tom is also working with Davido Consulting on the large on-site septic system soil evaluation site visit with the state. On the director's items, I've been spending the last month basically hoping to wrap up as many things as possible and put a nice bow on them as best I can before I left. Get things organized for the interim as well as for the new executive director when they come on board. But most of those items will be addressed in the regular agenda, so didn't comment on them here. Any questions on the staff report?
Nope.
2 questions. The drop-in pickleball, that seemed higher last time? Is that
Uh,
a thing?
Because we have 14 sessions where like, a year ago we had 3. So, and we've really absorbed a lot of there were a lot of different groups that have played that used to be able to rent out space, but we're the only ones renting out right now. We've kind of absorbed those time spots to work with them.
And then two, I don't think I've seen a social media announcement about this triathlon. I'm usually on that stuff. I try to like share that like right away.
I'll
So
double check, because I thought I'd scheduled one for the first, so I'll go back and check. Thank you.
On the triathlon, is there an incentive to sign up early? Is there like a discounted rate?
There's a slight discount.
Slight, okay.
Okay, we will move on to unfinished business. We'll begin with the comprehensive plan update, Max Welton Trails Park signage.
You open up the memo, please? So, Trails Committee representatives, that's Matt and Jennifer and myself, met with Pat McVeigh last week. Gosh, was it just last week? I'm sorry, feels like a month. The sign pyramid has been filled out and taken up to the county. However, several questions came up, including a question on whether or not a sign can be placed in the easement. I followed up with the planner. I met with Adam County on the sign and copied Jonathan Lang, Deputy Director of Planning, on our conversation. As of now, I haven't heard anything. I don't know if the staff at the district office have heard anything back from Jonathan Lang. But I would encourage the Trails Committee folks or staff in the office to follow up with Jonathan Lang if we have not heard back on that application. It is not an official application yet. It has just been submitted for, can we even do this? And if we can't, we might have to reach out to the school district for permission to place a sign on their property, since it's their property. That's just notes on that. And I can show you the updated meeting. At the meeting, we discussed the idea of making the family a multicultural family, making the child a more gender neutral kind of child, not putting a dress on, maybe, baseball cap and shorts, I think was what we were looking at. And then converting the front of it's going to be a V'd sign, so an angle, so you can see it from both sides. So the front post would be have an owl on top of it, as opposed to a crow/raven. Any comments from the Trails Committee folks, or any questions on that portion?
I have not heard anything back in response to that email, so in the division of duties, I said that I could be the county liaison, so
Okay.
I can go ahead and follow up on that.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say don't even bother with the I think it was Chloe was the planner I talked to. I would just go to Jonathan and see if he could set up a meeting with him. Everybody else up there doesn't seem like they know what they're really looking at with the code, whereas he does.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
And this is silly, but can I ask a silly question about that?
Go for it.
So is
There are
there,
no silly questions.
right. So is that not a county easement, road easement that extends something from the border of Max Dalton Road into the school property and into the easement?
No,
towards
no,
the property.
it is not a county easement for a road. It is our easement for
No,
access.
sorry, I was misspoke. I was talking about Max Walton Road itself. So is there a setback and a county-owned setback along Max Walton Road of a certain width, 10 feet, 20 feet?
Right.
this
We
side,
cannot put it,
potentially sit
my understanding is we are putting it on the easement access to our property. We cannot build anything, as from my understanding, in kind of the buffer or the easement that the city has or the county has for the road.
Got it. Okay.
We would be placing it off the road a certain distance from the center line
Got it.
in our access easement.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay. Aquatic facility update. I noticed that we did change this, so there is a contract discussion as well. So I'll put that to the staff that updated that to answer that question. But the Joint and Aquatic Committee, we did have initial meetings with ARC and the subcontractors to kick off design project. I have been checking off items to do on the to-do list for the financing from the state. Any items that were left, I passed off to Matt or Carrie to follow up. ARC and I met with Jonathan Lang. Again, I didn't go to a planner. I went right to the deputy director to go through pre-application for site review, kind of pre-app, and sit down and ask. I gave the ARC folks an opportunity to ask any question they wanted of Jonathan. I think that went really well, and I think that will help with that process. So hopefully that gets them ready for site plan review. Based on the size of the project, SEPA will be required, so we will have to go through that process. I did reach out to a geotech firm and 2 surveying firms on island for the quotes on what we are responsible for getting done, prepping for design. So those requests went out. I haven't received anything back, but I don't have access to that email anymore. So did you guys receive anything back on those quotes?
We received one person saying that they were not available or interested in the project, and I didn't receive anything else. And so
Which person responded that they weren't interested? Fraser?
It was Rich Fraser, maybe?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't recall
No,
specifically, but
that's okay. It would have been either, so we sent it out to TMI and Rich Fraser for the topographical, and the geotech was, I believe, Palmer Geotech. And I copied Carrie on those emails so she could follow up with those. I don't know, Carrie or whomever.
yeah.
Do you want to follow on with the ARC contract discussion, possible action? I don't have any information on that.
Sure. Well, but first back to the contract, Doug. I spoke with Paul Curtis about it, and I let him know that they were not interested in it, and we started. He suggested that someone else to contact.
Okay, good.
I did ask him if he had any sort of idea what the expense would be related to those surveys, and he didn't know.
Okay, so the next thing would be the ARC contract discussion. Carrie, do you want to take over on that, or Sky? I don't know who's going to talk on that one.
That's me. So, so Doug and I chatted a little bit, or I asked him a question about the contract with ARC. And not knowing how these kinds of projects are done, and especially with, we've sort of commissioned this joint pool committee or steering committee. So you guys have authorized, I think it was in October, after the request for qualifications, you guys authorized to move forward with ARC. And then after that point, there was fees that were distributed, and then there was information about the contract. What we don't have, and I don't know for sure if this is a required thing, is we don't have any action by the board authorizing those fees explicitly, or authorizing the contract. I know it was reviewed by Pacifica, and it's not like anything's being done unhandedly or anything like that, but I don't know. I'm asking the question, does the board need to officially authorize those expenditures, that contract? something along those lines. That's one of my.
So, and I mean, my 2 cents on this is I don't know that it's necessary because the board authorized me to negotiate the contract. But if in the interest of being safe, if the board wants to approve the negotiation, that is perfectly reasonable, and the board could vote to do that.
Yeah, my personal opinion, Jen, is that authorizing Doug to move forward with the negotiations was sufficient for me. We had gone through the process of qualifying the different quotes for the project and had selected ARC as a board, but I'm willing to go either way with, based on your thoughts.
Right, so yeah, and so in my reviewing for this evening, I came to the same conclusion, right, that it had gone out for, I'm not gonna get the words right again, when we went out for the request for qualifications, right? But fee structure was not part of that. So is there recollection by any of the other commissioners on how that conversation went? And the qualifications, as I recall, for ARC was that they had completed a project of a similar scope in a similar situation as the size of our district. Was there?
Yeah, exactly. They had completed both the Port Angeles project, which is very similar to ours, and 2 community projects. The primary was in the East Side Community Center in Tacoma, neighborhood of Tacoma, with a similar population anyway. So similar size facilities, similar scope of facility components. So that was, and feedback from those communities and the leaders of those projects that they had done an outstanding job in managing funds, in cost efficiency, in setting up the facilities for sustainability. So those are all parts of the basis for us selecting it.
So, in the interest of just kind of putting everyone's minds at ease, my suggestion on this would be that if the board does not have a concern about the firm, about who we selected and why we selected them, that the board just votes to approve the contract as I've signed it. Then it's covered. Then Carrie can take that breath and go, okay, I'm good to move ahead and approve vouchers on this and put them to a certain account, or work with Matt to decide where things go until they can be reimbursed. It just, I don't know that it's necessary. I don't think it is, but in the interest of just kind of giving everybody that, okay, we're good, the board could take that action and it would resolve all of that.
Okay, thank you, Doug, for that. Second question then. The invoice the invoice or invoices that we have been presented with, is there any sort of check and balance on that? Is there a fee schedule that we can say, yes, this is in line with what we understood?
I don't know if Doug did, but I haven't had a chance to compare it with the fee schedule that is like the last couple of pages of the contract that I sent you guys.
So the only thing I would say is that their contract is a not to exceed unless we change things significantly. So their invoices can be what they're going to be, but they're to not exceed the total amount unless we make huge changes. So,
Is that not to exceed that amount broken down by, I have a lot of questions about this, and I'm sorry we're having to hash Is that, not to exceed portion, would you say that it's broken down by phase such as thematic design?
No, it's not. It's the total amount. So it is not to exceed the total amount. Because
Okay.
we talked about that and they said they could have savings in a certain area and it might increase, there might be increased costs in another area, but it is not to exceed the total amount. That was my understanding in our discussion.
Okay.
So I would certainly recommend and highly endorse the idea of going back and looking at, you know, the invoice and the total amount and going, they said it would be, I believe they said it would be 4 months or 3 or 4 month process to do schematic. If we're looking at that and going, whatever the invoice is in line with a third or a quarter of the total amount that they said for schematic, then we're good. I would definitely recommend doing that. But by the same token, they are not to exceed the total amount. So unless the board comes in and says, instead of a 20,000 square foot facility, we're going to add 10,000 more square feet, that shouldn't change.
So do they have an understanding at least that we are limited in our funds availability so that we can't just, you know, either whether it's going to be reimbursed or not, we can't just suddenly pay a bill for, you know, $200,000.
And again, they're not going to be coming in and going, you know, they know that we have only been awarded like 388,000 and we have to get that money reimbursed, right? So there is a process of that. They are not going to come in with a $200,000 bill, but we should be definitely following through on getting the I's dotted and T's crossed so that the state can give us that money and make sure that we're ready for it. Yeah, I don't see that as an issue, but I would definitely follow through on the financing with the State Department of Finance and make sure that we've got everything that they need and we're approved to move forward on the 388.
For the initial.
And Carrie,
$3,000.
Carrie, I would say they're crystal clear on exactly how much we receive from the state. So there is no mystery there. That 300 and it was 400,000 minus a small administrative fee that the Department of Commerce takes back for processing your fund reimbursements. So that total is clearly known to them. And seems like the best answer to me anyway is for us to make a motion to approve the contract as negotiated to the limit of the state funds that we received and then manage it from there, as Doug described.
So,
Looking at their
this checklist of items for the financing from the state, is that something that we should be reviewing? Do we have a good read on that? How do we get reimbursed? What is that process? Do we feel that it's crystal clear what we need to do to get reimbursed and that are those funds available to us?
So, Matt, so there was a couple of pieces that Doug was trying to wrap up on his way out. And one of them was we have to have our deed or title, and that's been difficult for us to get, but I think Jennifer will maybe be able to help us get that rounded up. So that part. The other part was, you know, in the email that you forwarded me about them requiring that we have financing for the whole project being in the millions. I know, what about that part of the, I guess, grant compliance and able to release funds for us?
Yeah, so the process, Jen, is the funds are distributed through the Department of Commerce. Commerce is the vehicle. The funds have been applied to us, South Woodby Parks and Rec District, within the Commerce system, and we've been given, account access to that. Getting that transition or open to carry has not been sorted out yet, but we've got a contact at Commerce, a guy named Keith Parks, who's the one who is working through the logistics for us. And then there are T's and you need to cross and I's you need to dot, like before they expend funds on a property, you have to prove that you are in control of it. In this case, proving that we have a deed to the property and that it's in the public trust. So those things we are, like I said, Doug has been managing through, and now this handed over to me and Carrie as of a couple of days ago. So we need to make sure that we get those things done. This other question that you raised, Carrie, about the funds for the project, that was an understanding of the funding provided by Representative Paul and Representative Gilday at the time, was that this is pre-designed and that the funding for the project is not available or not in hand. So that's just something we need to clarify with the Department of Commerce representative in order for that not to be the final hurdle. And Representative Paul, is available to help us with that. So I think we just keep going through the final documents we need, and then we'll respond to Keith. I'll help you craft the response to Keith Parks to get that final hurdle cleared.
Is Parks who this email is from? Keith Parks?
Do you mean Keith Yates?
Keith Yates, sorry, I have Parks on the mind. Yeah, Keith Yates.
So is there a genuine concern that the money may not be available, or are we just talking about maybe a not ideally crafted sentence or two that causes us concern?
Yeah, I mean, to me, no. I think we just have to, we've never done this before. We've never received funds from state capital distributed this way to us. So I think we just have to, there's 17 steps in the process. We just need to finish through the process.
Related to
My opinion.
once we get these things squared away, I think I saw that it. So hopefully.
Sorry, couldn't hear you, Carrie.
Oh, it just sounded like after we do all of those steps to go through, it sounded like, I can't remember which document, but it sounded like it would be take some time until the funds would be able to be approved to a process.
So
Sorry, I still couldn't hear that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to find where it said, but after we complete the steps for obtaining the state grant funds, the preliminary, it said that would maybe take, I'm trying to find where I referenced it, 6 weeks to execute the contract, so there's a grant contract to be signed after that point, after we jump through those other. So it could be, sometime before we get our reimbursement.
and so the point being, the current invoices that we have received from ARC and TMI, we're looking at in the neighborhood of Department of Health. Okay, so we're looking at about $17,000 that we are needing to pay, that 18,000 that we are needing to pay, and it could be months before we potentially get reimbursement from the legislature to put back into our account. So.
And it looks to me like, so this was a January bill, so that about $17,000 the expenses for their services for January. So it just got that kind of reference.
So we're probably going to get a similar bill in a couple weeks.
I would expect so.
And so is there consideration to pause further work by ARC until we are further along with this checklist from the state?
I believe staff would support that decision. Because in just, a couple of days since Doug has, in just a couple of days since Doug has not been, on staff exactly anymore, it's been an immense amount of work for me, and I know some of this will be delegated, but it's getting up to speed, which is, it's taking some time, and making sure that I feel like we're dotting our i's and crossing our t's, and making sure that funds are available. And just in these 2 days, it's like an incredible workload, and I don't feel, I think probably not, but just until we can.
I can't hear what you're saying, Karen. You're breaking up.
Just a suggestion, just watching what's been going on just this week. There's some cost savings with not having a director for the next few months. Why don't we look to get the project manager to do this stuff ASAP? Because day-to-day operations are already being affected. Stress level is very high. Just a suggestion that we got a lot on our plate. We've got money that we're saving and not having a director for a couple months. Let's put that for the project manager.
Meaning ARC.
No.
No.
Project manager to manage
Hiring.
ARC,
Oh.
to manage the campground project. Just the other things that are going on as we go into spring, which is an extremely busy time of year. Just my suggestion.
In the past, 10 years ago, we moved through the time period of not having a director for a few months or something like that.
We didn't have this.
And it was okay, but there was not this going on. Campground, the permits for a sign, the pool project, all of these things.
The, getting $400,000 from the Department of Commerce in a form that we've never received before. So have no existing model or process or even file of paperwork to refer back to. This is new process.
Yeah, I mean, the existing process for the state, they distribute money all the time to people like us, but brand new for us.
I'll add, there's a lot of information that's coming in, and I think that it feels like a decision needs to be made, but we're not in a spot where we can make that decision. We have to reach out. We don't know exactly who we're reaching out to within a board.
We're getting there.
So
Just to stay focused on the this particular matter with ARC, so Matt, they've done projects like this before that have been probably funded like this before. Do you think they have any resource or anybody perhaps on their staff that could be a resource for us as to how to work with this? A. B, how do you think they could they manage a pause in this project?
Yeah, I would say I think it's worth asking them for sure. I think that's possible. And I think B, I think probably the appropriate thing to do, given everything I've just heard, is that we engage with them, directly in the next, say 72 hours to say, and I could take the lead on that with Carrie participating, to say, hey, here's the situation. We're still working through these final few steps to get the reimbursement process in place, and that is likely to delay reimbursement or payment of your invoices. So give us your experience from past projects. How do you work around this? Do you just accept that there may be delays in us paying your invoices because it's coming, but you also know that there's lead time in the process? Or is it in your recommendation, or do you recommend that we pause and deal with the impacts of that pause? So I think it's probably appropriate to engage them on both of those questions. And I think I'd be glad to do that. I think that's the right way to approach them.
Is that something that's best handled by the pool or the aquatic facility committee rather than just you and Carrie?
Yeah, I mean, either way, I think either way works.
Probably by committee.
Probably, yeah, I think that the committee needs to know.
Oh, sure. Yeah, for sure.
This within the same time frame.
I don't have a problem with that as we go through this. I keep thinking to myself, I don't also want to stall a process that's in motion, too much. We have a goal of completion, and I know we've talked about in the full committee, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but being able to meet the criteria for the next funding source. And I guess my hesitation is that, you don't want to slow the process down too much.
As far as being far enough along for when we go out to the
Correct.
constituent for a vote. Okay.
Multiple
Yep.
reasons, and the funding that Matt would address.
Well, and yeah, and just as a separate, one of the other topics I was going to raise is yesterday, or I think it was yesterday morning, Representative Paul reached out to me to confirm that he is going to be the joint sponsor of our funding request for this year's capital budget with the new Representative Shavers. So they are jointly sponsoring our request, and the request as drafted is for the remainder of the ARC quote to us. So we showed them the full ARC quote that was negotiated, as Doug described. And we said, you graciously funded $400,000 in the supplemental capital budget in 2022. And the remaining amount on that total quote was $1.35 million. And that was the subject of the request to Representative Paul. And then he, as I told you last meeting, he agreed in principle to support it and was discussing with our new Representative Shavers, District 10, over the sponsorship of it. Any funding request has to be sponsored by a member, and now they have agreed to jointly sponsor it. That's what he informed me of yesterday. So there is ongoing support, to the kind of questions that Carrie, you saw. And that'll be part of our response to the county, is that we've got it's not just a point in time, offer this to the district and then forget about us. This is continuing support they're talking about, like I said, a higher level of support this year to continue this process with the selected vendor ARC all the way to the completion. To match up with other sources of funding, the capital campaign that the foundation is leading, and potential for a publicly voted bond. So that's all part of this conversation, but obviously the nuts and bolts of actually getting the funds distributed for the first time with us is
So
we
Matt,
have to work through it.
does that agreement in principle then buy us time for Carrie's concerns and concerns about, getting a new director and the interim in between?
Well, yeah, I mean, the nuts and bolts though are that we have an invoice to pay and we need to get the money from Commerce to pay it. So tick tock, we need to get through those final steps. So, yeah, and I think we can, again, given that, things are happening rapidly, we can, as Doug has handed that off to Carrie and me, and we've got the steering committee also to support. So I think, I think that the guidance is a good idea. We get the committee is currently set to meet on Tuesday, I think. Tuesday, Eric? Is it Tuesday?
Correct. 3:00.
Yeah, and I think we can use that as include ARC in that meeting and then raise these issues and ask these questions. It's only 5 working days or 4 working days away, so I think that we can balance the schedule that work with this committee.
So in the interest of time, would it behoove the pool committee to go ahead and get an email off to ARC in advance so that they can have answers at the Tuesday meeting rather than posing the questions at the Tuesday meeting and further delaying a response on what their experience is and how they can be helpful with this Department of Commerce
So the
checklist?
question I have is similar to Jennifer's, would that mean that you and Carrie could meet with ARC prior to that meeting?
That's possible. Yeah, we could do it that way. We could do it as an email to the committee, as informing them of the situation, and I think maybe that's the right way to do it. It's just we hold the committee meeting as it's currently scheduled, and we invite ARC to it on Tuesday, and then we send a note to the committee following this meeting to say, hey, here's the board discussion and the situation, and Carrie and I are going to reach out to ARC to ask these questions and ask them to bring the answers to the meeting on Tuesday, and then we can form a recommendation at that meeting based on what ARC tells us. I think that's a good sequence. That gives them enough time to.
Good with that, Jake?
Yeah.
I agree, Matt.
I have one more nuts and bolts question. So there are expenses that are outside of the ARC contract, such as there was the $1,000 to the Department of Health, and there's going to be these surveys that are also outside of the ARC agreement. So it would be my expectation that, like, under normal circumstances, anything over $5,000 has to be bid. Is that right? Or at least get rewritten quotes and must be brought to the board before.
Yeah. So Carrie, you're gonna have to get closer to the mic. I'm missing every other word.
Yeah, I just need to go over a little bit. I don't see much. Okay, so for the expenses that are outside of ARC's contract. So for instance, there was the $1,000 to the Department of Health for site inspection. Whatever.
Okay.
And then there's the geotech survey and the topographical survey. So those are what we are to pay outside of the ARC contract. So for my understanding is that we would normally more purchase that he didn't know how big those were going to be. But $5,000 or more, we would have to be getting multiple quotes, ideally 3, and it would be board approved in advance. So how does that play into the process here? And I will tell you that they were very much wanting to hit the gas on the surveys. It sounds like it's a bottleneck issue. We can't really do anything about that. Right? And I guess that's my other question. So what we're doing.
Yeah. So, okay. I think I understand. So the total, just to characterize the sequence of events for ARC, as Doug was indicating, there's a first phase of the work they're going to do that's going to last roughly 4 months. They expect to last roughly 4 months. So they divided the project into, and any project they do like this, into phases. The first is called schematic design, SD. And that's the phase we're in. The total that they quoted us in the negotiated contract with Doug is for $297,000 for their work and the work of their subcontractors. And they have a number of subcontractors. And there are other things like you're describing, Carrie, that are outside that. Like the geotech survey, like the Department of Health application fee for the pre-design report. So the total granted to us from the legislature through Commerce is $389,000 roughly. So there's roughly $100,000 beyond the ARC and ARC subcontracted costs associated with the first phase, which is schematic design. So that's another question we can work in this conversation with ARC and discuss at this Tuesday meeting, is to see if we can get a better feel for what those things might be beyond what we know about with geotech and with this Department of Health application fee. But my strong feeling is that it is not in excess of that $100,000 that goes beyond what we will be invoiced by ARC. So I think
I guess
sorry, say that again.
my question is more procedural, I guess. So they want us to get these surveys going. My understanding from the past is that we have to go through these steps for certain levels of expenses. So that would mean that we couldn't do the next step of a survey unless these surveys come back at, $1,000 or something like that. If they're over $5,000, do I need to bring those back to the board before we schedule them, before we spend that money? Because
If ARC did those, doesn't fall under our bidding.
Yeah, in that case, wouldn't ARC be working with subcontractors of their own?
but it's just we pay it separately.
But they're selected. There was only, I know part of the talk was there's only so many people that do that. So finding those comparison bids isn't probably going to happen in a timely fashion anyway.
Right, but it is not a part of the contract, it's not a part
Yeah,
of the
I get it.
It's listed, these things are called out separately from the fees.
Right.
So, traffic consultant, I don't know what these things are. But do I need to bring these back to the board before we do that?
Traffic control, if they wouldn't do that, just sports complex. I think that's $10,000.
I guess that's the question though. It's under ARC's demand. I mean, they're the ones setting this up. It's not you. It's not.
No, it is us.
Well, no, but I'm saying they're.
We're like having to chase down the folks,
Right.
we're having to tell them what to do, it's very much us.
This is where a project manager fits perfect.
The discussions that I've heard is that they have a preference on who they're choosing. So, I don't know how that plays in there because I know there was discussion about we prefer this organization over another. Please go with that organization. That's what I meant is that they're got, even though I understand we're paying for it. So I don't have the answer. I'm just supplying that information.
But who actually reaches out to that preferred vendor?
They want us to, and so maybe that's a question for ARC.
I think that's a question for
Is Doug
ARC.
still on the line?
So here's the situation. They give us specifications and we send them out to vendors, and those vendors for topographical survey or for the geotech, they get back to us with a quote. My suggestion would be, if you're pausing this anyways, these surveys can take that same time to pause, and we can get those quotes from TMI and Palmer Geotech and look at what those amounts are and see where you're at. And then look at moving forward with all of those, or talking to Representative Paul and Representative Shavers to say increase, if you need to, the second ask to up that amount. It's not an exact science here. There's no easy answer here. And it sucks that I left at this exact time, because this is exactly what I would be fighting, the same battle. Carrie's asking the questions. She's absolutely right. We are in an unknown state right now. And that's very uncomfortable for staff. And I get that. So it is something that needs to be looked at. I would suggest while you're looking at and working with ARC on the process, get initial quotes in from the other two, TMI and I think it's Palmer Geotech, and see what those numbers are. If they're under the threshold of director approval, you can take those in and go, okay, this is kind of what we're looking at. This is our max, and go from there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Mhm.
And I did convey to Paul Curtis, is that right? My question about that, I said, this is our normal process that we have to get multiple quotes and we have to get it approved by the board. And I did ask how much these surveys cost, and they didn't have a clue, so.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, that surprises me because
yeah.
it's not like they haven't done this before. Okay.
So they weren't.
Yeah, but maybe, I was talking to him, so maybe there's someone else in our organization.
Again, perhaps ARC can provide some,
That's what she's talking
somebody else.
So I just to kind of put in my 2 cents here, as a interested third party that has no skin in the game, if you're looking at a project manager, I would look at a separate project manager that is not a part of ARC. That way you have a rep that is not part of the architecture firm or part of any of the subcontractors. They are working specifically for you. That is an additional cost. It is an additional cost and it is an additional expense. But having ARC be your owner's rep when they're the one you're contracting with is not really giving you guys a clear representative in the negotiation. Just my 2 cents.
Where do we start for project manager?
Well, by the time you hire a project manager, the director.
Put it out to bid.
That's the way I'm looking at it, is you're already in the process of finding a director. Now you're in the process of finding a project manager, as an interim until the director. If there was somebody waiting in the wings that has the experience and says, hey, this is something I can take on, knowing it's a limited engagement, you're doing it for a short time, that'd be wonderful. So maybe if that's the question and there's that particular person out there, wonderful. I'm going back to school district experience again about having people that can do that job. And they did it basically as a retirement job. And there's people that probably are on the island that might want to tackle that. But to me, the time frame seems so short that it seems difficult to fill that position and hire a director.
Right, I mean, unless you have someone in your head, Tom, that could be tapped. I mean, I have 4 people in my head right now.
Yeah.
I can tell you, we will have an ED hired before they could even think about helping us.
Say that again.
I've got 4 people in my head that I could call right now. 1 for sure would laugh at me. The second one would say, call me in 6 months or more. The other 2, I will have an ED hired before they could even entertain helping us. And one of those 4, I'm not even sure has the qualifications for the scope of this project. So unless someone knows someone, I hear you. I totally hear you.
I'll reach out to someone tomorrow. I think I know the answer, the retired YMCA director, but I think they're gonna say they're enjoying retirement, but I'll reach out to them tomorrow. They're just in Montevideo.
Okay, thank you, Jake.
Yeah.
If the choice was either or, a pause would be a better
Well,
situation.
he helped us last part. I don't know if he's doing this.
But again, it would be something that we'd have to put out to bid, right?
Go through a process.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like it maybe should have happened. But,
All right, so any further discussion? Does the board want to back into approval of the ARC contract?
Yeah, I'd recommend that we do, given all the conversation here, that way we're all on board with it.
So whoever, whoever's going to make that motion, I want it to be thoughtful as well as concise. This is a big deal. So
and perhaps affirming the contract,
Say that again, Carrie?
perhaps affirming the contract, I'm not exactly sure what the verbiage would be, but it's not like we're approving it now.
So this would be the time to do a motion properly in that I'd like it written down so that it can be read and recorded properly. So. Pause for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, what we could do is, just a thought, is we could authorize the progress through the contract with ARC through the completion of schematic design, which is what they have quoted to us at $297,000. I think that would put bounds on it. By the time we get to the end of schematic design, we'll have made enough progress to be able to approve the move into the next phase, which is called design development, which is basically a $600,000 phase, of which we only have $100,000 to fund or less. So we can't complete that phase until we get additional funding from some source, the state or otherwise. So to me, I think that puts a bound on it that I'm personally comfortable with, because we've got that bandwidth from the state.
Or do we need to even go further back in time and actually ratify or approve, contract been ratified, it's been signed, approve the ARC contract in its entirety? I don't know what the contract itself says, whether or not we can just approve individual phases. Is there any sort of an escape clause in this contract? Can't imagine without penalty.
Yeah, Doug can comment best on that.
Yeah, I don't remember there being a specific escape clause, but I do remember there being options to stop at any time. So, I mean, with notice to the other party. So I would say that the board could, I mean, and quite frankly, I would say that the board really at this point has already approved me to negotiate. So pretty much the contract's done. As I at the time had signing authority. So really the contract's been approved. This would just be approval for the sake of, staff and moving forward to be clear that yes, the board did approve the negotiation of the contract and the signing of it. It could be a legal argument either way, but I would suggest at this point that the board should look at an approval of the contract as Matt suggested, up to through that point of schematic design, and then look at the contract in detail over the next period, because then you've approved a certain section of it, But you can go back and look at it and go, if you have an escape clause, then you can approve the whole thing. You're fine.
Would something like a motion confirming the approval and signing of the contract with ARC for the completion of the schematic design portion of the proposed aquatic facility in the amount of $297,000. With some language like that.
I was gonna suggest to the limit of the state funding regulations that we talked about. I don't know if that. I think the-
Yes, because of the other surveys and those expenditures as well. That would be approving those expenditures, which is
So-
in addition to the contract.
Yeah, ARC
Yeah.
work and other,
Sorry, what was that, Matt?
I was saying ARC work and other associated schematic design tasks, like the Department of Health, like geotech, and whatever else is there outside their ARC's direct envelope. But yeah, I like what you said, Chris, the way you said it, Krista.
Okay.
Matt and Doug, just so you know, Krista and Eric are wordsmithing right now, so stand by.
Okay. Yeah, and I think, yeah, so I would think the dollar value should be estimated, softened, because 297 is the ARC quote, and as Carrie pointed out, these are outside, so it might be 10,000 more, it might be 20,000 more, it might be something like that. So I think,
Matt, does state funded regulations cover that then limit? We talked about that earlier. I think you were the ones that suggested that.
say again.
Well, you're saying instead of putting the dollar amount, right? So what if we were to say to approve the contract with ARC through schematic design to the limit of the state funded regulations?
Yeah, well, limited the state funding authorization.
To the limit of the state funding operation?
Authorization.
Authorization. And then, but I think we need to specify, you said approve the contract with ARC through schematic design.
Correct.
And approve associated tasks with other vendors up to the limit of the state authorization. So that covers those other vendors that are outside the ARC.
Yeah, so what they said that is outside our wording is, the following consultants are by owner: surveyor, geotechnical engineer, special inspector, and so on. So what they are saying is, they could be associated expenses of
Consultants and vendors.
yeah.
So.
Yeah, and these are, and they're tasks associated with schematic design. So,
So,
you know, it's not like they're random and outside that envelope.
all right, let me see if I can do this. So, a motion that is confirmation of the approval and signing of the contract for the completion, okay, confirmation of the contract with ARC and other associated vendors for the completion of the schematic design for the proposed aquatic facility to the limit of the state funding authorization.
Yeah, I like that.
So I will make a motion for the confirmation of the contract with ARC and other associated vendors for the completion of the schematic design for the aquatic facility to the limit of the state funding authorization.
I'll second that motion.
It has been moved and seconded that we can confirm
For the confirmation of.
Confirmation
of the contract with ARC and associated vendors for the completion of the schematic design phase for the aquatic facility to the limit of the state funding authorization. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Eric, I.
Krista, I.
Jake,
Aye.
Jennifer, aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the motion passes.
So now that you've done that, I just kind of skimmed through the contract while you guys were working through that. And section 9.5 says the owner, which is you guys, may terminate this agreement upon less than not 7 days notice, does written notice to the architect for the owner's convenience and without cause. So at any point in time, if you guys want to cancel this contract, 1 week's notice is all you need to give them.
And no financial penalty?
It says you may terminate this agreement upon less than 7 days written notice to the architect for the owner's convenience and without cause.
Okay.
So you would be responsible, obviously, for paying anything up until that point, but you have a 7-day get out of jail free clause.
Thank you.
Oh, wait. And you would be cost attributed to the termination for services rendered and any costs attributable to the termination, including costs attributable to the termination, architect's termination of consulting agreements. So if they had contracted or if they had, already done something as a subcontractor, you would be responsible for that payment as well. But you can terminate with 7 days notice and just pay for what's been done already. So if there's outstanding bills, you would be responsible for those, but you can terminate with 7 days notice.
One more question. So of the steering committee, so what we're doing is paying for people out of M&O, is that correct? Rather than one of the project accounts and being reimbursed? Or are we paying for them out of, say, the property fund? Right this time it's already in the M&O fund, but I just want to make sure that you guys are good on that. Usually that would be where we would be paying project expenses, but earmarked for the campground or next one trail. Maybe that's a question I can discuss later. Yeah, I mean, Matt's got.
So my suggestion would be that Carrie and Matt confer on that separately and work out the details, and then that can be brought back to the board for review if needed.
I agree.
Thank you, Doug.
Any further discussion on the aquatic facility update? All right, then let's move on to the campground. Doug.
The initial discussion was that the site plan review for the campground should have been denied back in 2019 when we first brought it, as there is no usage provision for a campground in a park zone. Now, I immediately argued with them or brought up that that's ridiculous because there are campgrounds in park zones on North Whidbey, in Central Whidbey, and there was one on South Whidbey. So due to that, we needed a zoning code interpretation process to get the county to get a ruling on whether the project can proceed without a change in the zoning or the project design. I told both of them that this needs to be expedited because this project has already been delayed by the mistakes made by the county, which they admitted to. And that in the process, we had over $100,000 in grant funding that was now in jeopardy. I since then have conferred with Allison Delwo, our grants manager at RCO. It is actually $204,000 right now that the district would lose out on if the county can't get this pushed through. So we started the zoning code interpretation. They waived the fee. I thanked them profusely for that, and said that we needed to expedite this process. I then followed up with an email once I got back to the office and said, this is what we talked about. You said you would expedite this process, and got a response back that should be in file in the email stating that, yes, that was all correct. So we now have a sign up. We've had it up for a while. It went up about a week and a half ago and has been up there. It will be up there through the 22nd of February. Once that is done, the comment period will end and they will submit a decision. My suggestion would be that the campground committee reach out to people they know to email in comments that a campground in a park zone makes perfect sense. In parallel to that, I secured a quote from Davido on the designing of the water system for the campground. That amount came back as $31,159. That quote is included in your board packet. First on this, I did not get other quotes simply because Davido has done all the water system capacity analysis for this project, and they put together a small water system management plan. I've called on this in the past when we've had this done with Davido, and any other firm looks at it and goes, well, they've already done all the hard work. Now it's, we're not going to be able to compete with them because we're going to have to spend time catching up to where they are. So I got the one quote. The recommendation I would have would be to table this until you get a decision from the county on whether or not you can proceed in the park zone with the campground. If you get that determination, or the board could approve the quote based on the concept that or based on the idea that, or contingent upon, that's better. There you go. Contingent upon the campground being approved in the park zone. If you do that, then you would have to come back if there was a different way that the district was able to do this, that it wasn't approved in the park zone, but you were able to pull that 30 acres out and subdivide it and redesign it, then you'd have to come back and redo this. But it would give staff the ability to proceed. Just so we're clear, that $31,000 we would get reimbursed. I did talk to Allison on that as well, and said this is specific design for a water system for the campground to provide something in this phase of construction. And she said that it should be eligible for the 50% reimbursement from the remaining grant funds. So that $31,000 is actually approximately $15,500 that would come out of the $190,000 we still have left of the grant funds reimbursement that we've already received. I would recommend, again, approving this quote dependent upon the disposition of the ZCI from the county, or not approving this quote and holding until you get that, since you won't get approval till after February 22nd at the earliest.
Doug,
And then,
Doug,
go ahead.
Any insight or feedback from the county? So the public comment period ends February 22nd, and then they make a determination. Any idea
Correct.
what that time period looks like?
So I was told that this process could take 60 to 90 days. And I literally scoffed, and I think I under my breath cursed, and I think they heard what I was saying. And I basically said to them, this needs to be expedited. This can't be 90 days. This can't be 60 days. This has got to be quick. You guys have held us up for 3 years, and I think I said 3.5 years. And we've been spinning our wheels because you didn't tell us this 3.5 years ago. This needs to happen fast. We cannot be, we are going to lose this money. So Mary and Jonathan were on board with the idea that they need to get this expedited. Can I guarantee that? No. I mean, they said 60 to 90 days. Could it be 90 days? I can't tell you it can't be. I can tell you only that their demeanor was such that I was feeling like they were on board with moving us forward, which means I would suggest, I think that we are looking at closer to 30 to 45 days would be my guess, but I'm not the one doing it.
Doug, are we sort of passively waiting for responses from them after the comment period, or is there some action required on our part to check in?
My suggestion would be that the campground committee members or someone on staff reach out to Jonathan Lang on February 23rd. That's just, if I were there, that's what I would be doing. I would be contacting Jonathan Lang, maybe even on February 22nd, and going, or the gentleman was John Lanier. He was the long-term planner this was assigned to. So that could be who I would reach out to on the 22nd, going, have you received any comments? When can we expect an answer?
Carrie, do you have email addresses for John Lanier, Jonathan Lang, and Mary Engel that you can supply to the campground committee?
I would imagine that I can easily get Mary Engel's. Doug, you would have an email.
We were CC'd.
So
We were.
you guys were CC'd on the emails.
We're good.
You should have them.
Thank you, though.
Thank you.
So again, my recommendation would be to hold on approval of the water system design. And in addition to this, I would say too that I did ask, since we're looking at the pool and the campground at the same time, and we have 2 water systems, I asked, can we combine them and from economy of scale get a lower price? They're 2 separate systems, and we cannot get economy of scale that way. We would still have to design, even if we did them together, even if we went to the state together, it would actually kind of inhibit the process to put them together, because you might have to then wait for one while the other one was waiting to be approved. So in my discussion with Davido, it kind of came clear to me that the 2 should be done separately and distinct of one another, so that, if you get the campground approved so you can get the funding done so you can construct the campground, you don't have to wait for the aquatic center design to be approved before you move forward.
Do we agree that it doesn't make sense to approve this quote at this time? If we just have to come back and redo it, we can just easily table it.
Do you want to make it contingent?
I would rather if we approved it and made it contingent upon, because if, let's say, we can work with them to get approval in less than 30 days, we could potentially be able to move on to the next step before the next board meeting.
Doug,
Yeah.
have you reached out to other folks to get a quote for this as well? That's a pretty sizable one that's usually.
The water system design, I did not, again, simply because of Davido's, they're the inside lane on this. They've done the water system update for our water system management plan. They know our system better than anybody else. For anyone else to come in and do this, it's going to probably cost 150% of what they're putting in. Now, that's the other thing that you could do. You could see if there's another engineering firm out there that would give you a quote on this. When I've called in the past on this, the water system management plan, firms would not even bother. They wouldn't even waste their time giving me a quote. I couldn't get 3 quotes when I did the water system management plan because they would not give me a quote. I couldn't get firms to do it.
So our next board meeting is the 15th.
Which would be 3 weeks after the 22nd. I would table until then. That's what we do, 27th. I mean, maybe they can be faster.
Table?
Yeah, but just by the meeting, perhaps, that's it.
I like
Okay.
that idea.
All
Until
right.
next meeting. Start email.
All right, any other further discussion on campground? Moving on to the fields update, please.
Sky, you want to take this one?
Ready to reach an agreement with the Soccer Association regarding the player maximums on the fields. We got a little last month. We're currently awaiting the enrollment numbers and game schedules once their registration closes in March to affirm that they're not going over the limit. Practices for youth soccer will begin March 27th. Actually, the U13s, yes, they start.
All right. Moving on to the executive director search.
Okay, so having left on Friday, I don't have updated info from this memo because I wrote it on Friday. But we had the board workshop on the 7th. Krista had completed when I left an updated job posting document that had been circulated to staff and commissioners for comment. I had saved the updating process document from that workshop on our server, and Carrie would upload it once to the shared drive once we had that set up, and the job description was ready to go as well. I'm hoping that there's now a consolidated document that Carrie has put together with Krista's initial document and staff and board comments. Has that happened?
There is a new document that incorporates feedback from the staff. I don't know, does this have any addition since then?
I've not received any other input or anything.
Okay.
I know there's some folks around
Logging in, yeah, we've had some technology challenges. I think my question is to the board, how much time do you need to look over this latest version and respond back with additional edits, deletions, whatever you would like? And I also would like to just take a moment to thank the staff for their generous and effort working with me on this. Thank you all very much.
So I'm not hearing anything from the board. Do we need, do we need more time?
Not an email. So I've looked at it, that's what we're talking about, and I like it. I don't have anything I would add or delete from it. I think it's a little lengthy, but I also understand why it is. So
Jake?
Chris, I'm good with it. I'm sorry I didn't respond to the email, but I'm good with it.
Yeah, I'm good with it as well. I read over it and I didn't see anything grammatical. I really appreciated that we list extensive knowledge of aquatic facility and campground. I think as of the discussion we've had tonight, that would really shine in the new director whenever he comes aboard. So I like it.
So, and are you good with? Yes. So I would say this is now no longer draft number 2. I would say this is the job description. So if it can be, if what is currently up on WRPA and NRPA be replaced with this version. And I believe, Doug, you uploaded it to those organizations. Did you leave?
So here's the situation. I gave Carrie my login and password for NRPA. She can absolutely update that on NRPA, and it is right there ready to go. I showed her how to do that before I left. The WRPA site is a link to our website. So all Carrie has to do for WRPA to be updated is to upload it to our website, and that link is already updated. So all she has to do is that, and it's done. So it should be a very quick transition and very easily updated. Then any applications you have received in the interim should be given that updated job description.
And where else were we going to advertise this position?
So,
When I left, we had talked literally that we could do it locally, but to do any additional like Indeed or anything like that was really not profitable or efficient enterprise. It doesn't yield positive results. These are the areas. If there's a person out there that is good for this job, they are looking at WRPA and NRPA. They're not looking at Indeed or any other job website.
But
so I plan to put it on the record combined with the News Times, the marketplace, or weekly, group list, and we can share it on Facebook and Twitter.
great. So, and from what I remember of our timeline, we extended out 1 week. So we're hoping to review, I think we already have a meeting set up, correct? For, is it the 28th?
So the 24th was.
24th is the
review
deadline.
Resumes and
Okay.
rank. The 28th was an executive session.
Okay, and so the 24th, all of those resumes and some sort of ranking grid will be on that SharePoint site, correct?
Sure. Are we creating the grid? Who's creating the grid?
That's a good question. Let's see.
I meant to look and see if there was one in the past that I didn't mention.
Although I don't know if it's going to help us too much, but Would you take a quick look? Don't spend a tremendous amount of time, but see if there's anything. And then if not, we can probably
Something out there.
pull that together. Okay.
Okay, so then, yeah, we'll upload the applications and such to the SharePoint. I'm thinking upload on the 24th.
I mean, my suggestion would be upload as you get them from this point.
Yeah.
Once you set them out, and then let people know that they're there so that you can start to review them, because that'll speed up your time frame, and give people a chance to start reviewing, information that they have in their resume and so on and so forth until you get to that, first actual review, and then you can kind of go from there. Just kind of save yourself some time. Yeah, so that's what I would do in kind of that replacement process.
And does this say specifically on the websites when applications need to be in by?
It's,
If not, it can be updated. So it's one of those where if it says February 17th, Carrie can go in, and when she updates both of those, she can contact WRPA or NRPA and change it to the 24th. But I think we put it in as open until filled. And, first review of applications was initially put it as February 17th, but I don't remember if we changed that before I left or not.
all right, I'll change the date on there. It says the 17th, so.
Yeah, so I would suggest changing the dates on each of the sites to the February 24th will be first review of applications.
But the other part of this was figuring out some systems, some help, some teams to go forward with the day-to-day operations for all of you. And I think we talked about this a little bit during the workshop, and we were going to look at the existing committee assignments and see how we can put teams, put pairs, and kind of assign areas. I think the first step is what specific day-to-day areas or how would you want that organized to make it helpful for all of you?
So one thing we talked about is, yeah, the need to occasionally reach out to someone to, get direction, some guidance. And we do have those committees in place, and so that does give us a spot to start with, if it's a trails type question, we reach out to people that are in that committee. And I think we would suggest that in those interactions that we reach out to both, so that it's not one person, so part of the committee assignments that are not addressed, I guess.
Right, yeah.
So some of the tasks, and Matt touched on this earlier, vouchers and payroll, he already has the authority to sign off on things. It's a little difficult because we normally have two people authorized to do that, the director and Matt, and if I thought far enough in advance, I would have brought to the board the authorization to approve another person as an auditing officer, maybe next month. So right now, it's a lot of work for him to coordinate, but we'll make it work. We got a schedule in place. So probably Matt, I would suggest Krista is someone that I've been talking about financials with. We don't have a finance committee. I guess some of that thing.
We can make one.
So my 2 cents, I would suggest that you have kind of just an administrative team that you put in place for day-to-day operations, because there is going to be stuff that comes up. And what we had talked about at the workshop was kind of a two-person board subcommittee, just like we have everything else. And just have that be kind of the maintenance and operations committee in the interim until you get to a point where you have a director on board. And then they can handle the stuff that doesn't fit under the existing committees.
Yeah, I think where you started with that, I think the admin committee, I think it's a natural, Krista, you and me as finance and secretary.
Okay.
So admin, not maintenance, but
Right.
that admin committee, I would think you and I could do that, and that would be a good natural fit.
Okay. Okay, so treasurer and secretary as the admin for vouchers, payroll, and anything like that. Maintenance and operations. Now, just a question, would programs be part of that or separate?
We do not have a program.
Right. We also don't have an admin
So,
committee, but we just created one. So
Yes.
that's kind of where I'm going with this. So, it would, okay,
so yeah, if you're talking operations, that would include programs.
programs, okay.
What do we have for HR? Like,
Yeah, personnel was one of the things.
yeah, like any, like, vacation requests, sick requests, time sheets, all those pieces.
Would HR also fall under admin?
Yeah, I would say.
I would think,
Yeah, it does in the corporate world.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think that's up to you as a board to direct. If you want HR under admin, it's under admin. If you want HR under operations, it's under operations. But you need to be very clear about where it is.
It's under admin.
There you go. That's the answer then.
But I think there need to be different two people who are there for maintenance, operations, and programs.
Correct me if I'm wrong, the two people left.
Yeah.
Jake
And
and
put me
Eric,
down.
thank you so much for stepping up and taking that on.
Thank you. So there you go.
And yes, some of the other things that we have taken care of are the campground, there's a campground committee, correct?
There
Yes, that's us. Yeah.
The pool, we have the steering committee. Right?
So I just want to be clear in my own head. We're saying steering committee, but it's not really a steering committee, correct? Isn't it the joint?
The joint.
Yes.
Because I know that we.
Yeah, so there's two things. So we have our subcommittee on the board for the aquatic center, and that's me and Eric.
Yeah.
And then we have the joint steering committee, and we've used steering committee recently because that's how contractors like ARC refer to an entity like that. So we've called it the joint steering committee. With that is between the district and the foundation. And that is me and Eric on the district side, and it's Marnie Zimmerman and Rich Bachikalupi from the foundation.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
So I would certainly weigh in on this and go on the side of the pool committee as opposed to the joint aquatics committee. The foundation members, while they're wonderful people and really contributing to the project, should not be directing staff. That should come from the board, not from a foundation member.
Correct.
That's understood.
Right. And that's why this subcommittee, the board subcommittee of me and Eric, I think is the appropriate starting point.
What else was on?
I would absolutely agree with that.
Okay, agenda and board meetings under admin.
That's
Say again?
secretary.
Secretary and chair.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So board meetings, in my mind, go to the chair initially and the secretary if the chair is unavailable.
okay, chair,
Chair and yeah.
okay.
The chair, I have only ever in my entire 10-year career there, I never sent anything to anybody but the chair as initial, like, here's the board meeting, a draft agenda. Do you have anything to add? So anyone on the board that wishes something to be on the agenda should communicate that to the chair. The chair then communicates that to me or to
So that's for,
whoever's
well,
correct.
Really the chair, but
no, I mean,
I would say chair with the secretary as a backup.
I meant the flow is that if you guys have something to put on the agenda, it goes to
yes.
the chair and then she would relay it to us. Or
So when Doug and I were working together, you guys sent it to Doug, I think, on the draft. If there was something that didn't make sense, pick up and walk through. So in the interest of relate, it would make sense if the individual commissioner like on the agenda just came forward and took it. Probably.
okay. I will, catching up on things probably that I didn't know. On stuff. Under the category of things that I appreciated that
Hopefully we get somebody in place before that's really needed.
How much stuff is there?
Yeah, what do you want?
they have to file in May.
Yeah, Krista and I have to file in May.
So yes, if you go to Island County Elections, the web page, there is an elections calendar that will tell you exactly which week is filing week. When I talked to, I didn't have a chance to talk to you, Krista. I'm sorry. I had a full plate as I was trying to get out the door here, but I talked to Jennifer and she indicated that she was planning on running for re-election and said that she thought Krista was running for re-election as well. There is a specific week in that elections calendar where you have to file. That is when you need to put that in, and then you will be on the ballot in November.
Is
Do
there,
the date?
May 15th through 19th.
All right.
is there any action on our part, Doug? Like, what do you normally do? Like,
The only thing I normally do in that is ensure that there is at least one person running for each position. So if Krista and Jennifer are both running for their respective positions, there is no need to take any other action as a staff member. You have at least one person running for each position. And in my opinion, now that I'm off the now that I'm out of the director position, I can say that I have no qualms about saying both of those candidates are completely qualified and should be endorsed to go for those positions. There is no reason to search for anybody to kind of put somebody on the ballot. You have somebody on the ballot. Anybody else is welcome to put themselves on the ballot, but those two, you've got somebody there. You will have a full board come November.
Anything else?
On that aspect, I have nothing else.
No, Carrie's
our
list.
So the grants that are not the pool or the campground. So,
So if we were to be awarded one of those grants, how would we be told?
So, yeah, so that was another area where I reached out to, after talking with Jen, I reached out to the state RCO, our contact there, Allison Delwell, our grant manager, and she added me to all of the applications that are currently pending. So I am in the information flow path for all those. We will be informed with an email from RCO, and I am in addressee on that email. So, and that's coming up as the state capital budget is worked and finished. So we're talking the next six to 8 weeks. So I'm officially now in the system.
Okay, so
So-
and my 2 cents on that. The week before I left was the WRPA lobbying week. I did lobby for the Park District. The current funding level recommended by the governor is 120 million for those grant programs at that level. In the WWRP local parks category, our pickleball courts was the first project that was not receiving funding. Every other project that we had, the amphitheater, the artificial turf field, was below pickleball courts. So none of our projects at the 120 million level recommended by the governor were going to be funded in WWRP local parks. We will probably get funding from youth athletic facilities. And my recommendation would be to look at those, and potentially, if you're going to go for a bond issue in November for the pool, look at adding on additional funds to fund any grants that you get to be able to match those dollars for potential pickleball courts or the artificial turf field up in the sports complex. Those 2 projects are in youth athletic facilities. The other projects, I advocated for full funding, which would cover everything. If that happens, you might want to looking to budget for a project manager, because staff is not going to have the bandwidth to process all of those grants and all of those projects all at the same time.
Yeah, understood. Okay. What else?
And I would also say, I would just from going through this grant cycle the last time. So as Doug said, we're 1 project below the line at that funding level. What they do is they inform all the projects that they, that are receiving funds or that have been designated to receive funds of that decision and where they drew that water line based on the fund total. And then each respondent has a chance to answer, can they provide the requisite matching funds? And if so, then they take the money. There are oftentimes several projects in the list, many projects, depends, where the recipient cannot deliver the matching funding, and they end up relinquishing the grant funds. If you look in the records of past grant years cycles, so people drop off the list who are funded. And what they do is then that money goes to the next project or the next project or the next project. So I would say if we're close, I'd say there's a decent chance that there's a flow down and that we get either partially funded or completely funded. So we'll just keep that in mind, that that's a possibility.
Carrie?
I think you took all the items off my list, so. Okay. That I didn't think of today.
Say again?
Okay.
I would suggest definitely to keep it in your back burner and look at it as this could come available and we need to be ready to react and have that information ready for the new executive director when they get on board. I feel terrible walking away at this time, but it just, this opportunity, the opportunities that you have there are huge, and you need to be prepared as a board to react to those opportunities with efficient dollars in November, should it come available. You do not want to leave those dollars on the table if the state awards them to you.
Okay. So I think that brings us to good of the order. Matt, are you prepared with your comments, sir?
I am. Thank you, Jen. And thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak and recognize our departing director, Doug, on behalf of the board and the staff and the community that all of us represent. Doug, you served this district for nearly 10 years, serving this community of 17,000 nearly citizens. And when you started way back then, the board at the time gave you, I'd say, two general objectives. First, you had to expertly run what we already had in an incredible park system. And second, you had to find ways to grow our district and grow. In saying growth, I mean extend the benefits of the park system and programs to even more people across the community. So reflecting on this, it's clear you were successful in both of those objectives. So again, the first priority was to run the park system that had been serving the people of South Whidbey for more than 30 years when you got here. So what did that mean? That meant you managed an incredible diversity of facilities, from sports fields and trails and playgrounds and picnic areas to courts and wetlands and woods, from a skate park and a pump track and a sledding hill to trails and trees and lakes and fishing docks and boat launches. These facilities were clean and mowed and trimmed and cleared and swept and raked and made perfect for the community. You managed an incredible diversity of programs and events as well. Things like Children's Day and Chum Run and Daddy-Daughter Balls and Whidbey Island Triathlon, Polar Bear Plunges, Canine Nosework classes, summer camps, swim clinics, Little League, soccer, basketball, volleyball, and the list goes on. These were all well organized, smoothly conducted, serving people young and old across South Whidbey. You took care of our infrastructure and our equipment. These are the things not often seen and only noticed when there's a problem. From electrical systems to our water and wells with all their pumps and valves and tanks, into our roads and parking areas, irrigation and drainage systems, the tractors and mowers that take care of the fields and the vehicles that get programs and equipment to people, the buildings and shelters both here at Community Park and at our other locations. You dealt with dry spells and storms and floods and weeks of rain and forced cleanup on the trails and times when cars drove over on our fields, and you found ways to quickly get things settled and back online. You also conducted the business of the park, paying employees and vendors and dealing with insurance and medical plans and credit cards and travel claims, setting up and running the website and our program registration and our facility reservation systems and our accounting system and financial reporting tools. As you heard tonight, you wrote and negotiated and signed contracts and joined agreements with other organizations and collected bids for major projects and equipment. And your leadership in this was repeatedly recognized, most notably by the state auditors, who came every 2 years through your term and told us the district was a model for others to follow in the management of public funds. And finally, you built relationships across the community, most importantly with our citizens using or wanting to use a park or participate in a park program. This was the soccer club and Little League and Ultimate Frisbee and Islanders football and people running on the high school track at night and the radio controlled flying group and more. It was our District 10 legislators, Senator Mazzal and Representative Paul, Representative Gilday, and our RCO representatives in Olympia and our county commissioners and county staff and the school district and the city of Langley and the Port District and the youth center, senior resources and the Lions Club and more. Our citizens knew you, and the stakeholders who interact with and support us knew our district through your efforts. Okay, how about the second priority, the to grow part, extending facilities and programs to more people across the community? What did this mean? It meant expanding our facilities within our existing parks when you added picnic shelters and playgrounds and expanded the trail system in Community Park and in Trustline Trails. You also worked your magic in Olympia, helping bring $750,000 in grants to the district that served to more than double the size of the parks available to our citizens during your tenure. This meant the protection and the public trust of new properties for hiking and walking trails, and a campground in the works to help address the need that arose when South Whidbey State Park Campground was suddenly closed to public use. Put most simply, there are more parks and more facilities closer to more people now than when you arrived. This also meant delivering new or expanded programs. On one hand, managing through all aspects, the opportunities and the challenges of the incredible growth we've seen in youth soccer and in lake usage and in things like ultimate frisbee. In another case, it meant starting up new programs to meet the needs of our citizens, including pickleball and futsal, and now serve hundreds and hundreds of people. It also meant coming up with new infrastructure, and sometimes that was pretty creative. Building an improved maintenance facility was one, converting a parking lot to a pretty nice set of pickleball courts, adding parking carefully to handle growth, while at the same time working on agreements with entities like the school district to find places for new programs and activities without building anything new. In all those cases, you found a way. So most recently, you've been, as we've talked about tonight, building a foundation for our future, working to move forward with plans and surveys and studies and funding and community support for things like an aquatic center and new pickleball courts and an amphitheater for outdoor performances and an all-season field to serve even more people across South Whidbey and for a greater portion of the year. So Doug, our community is better for you and your work, and we're grateful to you for that. We wish you the best as you move on to serve the citizens of Moses Lake, and we know you'll do well. And while your staff congratulates you on all these things, they say most of all, they'll miss the aroma of your toaster oven nachos that evidently permeated the office. They say you lived your life true to your Instagram handle, which I never knew, but now know as Nacho Daddy. The board isn't sure what that means, but we like it. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Matt. Wow.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
So, first off, Nacho Daddy is simply a nod to my my not biological children, because I'm not their daddy, so I'm Nacho Daddy. And secondly, throughout that speech, it was very touching to me. But all I heard, as you talked about sports fields and programs and financials, I heard Peggy Nelson. I heard Tom Fallon. I heard Carrie Monfort, Sky Dunn. I heard Austin Carter, Chance, our newest employee. I heard the staff that has worked with me. They made that happen. I was just the one who got to sit up top and smile, and I didn't even look pretty. So I couldn't even say that my job was to be there and look pretty. My job was to work with these people and help them be the best staff they could be. They already were that. They didn't need me to help them, but they did it with me. We got there together. And I think the same thing can be said of the board. When I started there, the board was a great board. We had Matt. Matt's the only commissioner that's still left from the board when I got here. He's the longest serving one that was still there. The other commissioners, did we have our bumps in the road? We absolutely did, but we got on the right track. We worked through it, and we got there. This has not been me, and I don't want it to become me. This is a community-driven organization This is a community-loved organization, and it is simply put the commissioners and the staff that make this happen. This is not one person. This is all of you together, and I am humbled by the comments that Matt made. I did what I thought was right. I did what I thought my job was, and I did it to the best of my ability, just as the rest of our staff do every day. Listen to the staff, work with the staff, and this community and this district will continue to grow. You all have this in your best interests, and you all are on the right track, and you will get there. And I will happily be here to watch your success, to applaud your success, and to act as a resource in any way that you want me to. Staff has contact information for me. They can feel free to reach out to me at any time. I am always going to be here. I thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Cheers, Doug.
All right, we'll look forward to when you come back to play with Ike and the old man and whoever else. All right. I think we shall adjourn at 8:13.